On a quiet evening, just as dusk began to settle over the sprawling pine forests encircling Pine Ridge, Georgia, the last flicker of daylight filtered through the dense boughs, casting long shadows across the cracked asphalt of a lonely gas station. The station, a modest structure with peeling paint and a flickering neon sign that buzzed faintly, sat like a forgotten relic on the outskirts of the small town. Its pumps stood idle, and the faint hum of cicadas filled the air, mixing with the occasional rustle of pine needles stirred by a soft breeze. Emily Carter, a 16-year-old with a cascade of chestnut hair and bright green eyes, pulled into the station in her faded blue bicycle, her backpack slung carelessly over one shoulder. The late summer air was thick with the scent of pine and earth, and the sky overhead was a bruised purple, signaling the end of another long day. Emily had just finished her shift at the local diner, a part-time job she had taken to save money for college. The gas station was her usual stop, a place where she'd pause to grab a soda or a candy bar before pedaling the last mile home. Before we continue, make sure to like and subscribe to never miss a new video. And tell me, where are you watching this video from? I love seeing all different people come together for these stories. As she locked her bike to the rusted rack near the entrance, a subtle tension rippled through the otherwise still scene. The station was deserted, except for a lone attendant inside, who was busy wiping down the counter behind the glass. Emily's footsteps echoed softly on the cracked concrete, mingling with the distant call of a barred owl. She was humming a tune under her breath, the melody light and carefree, completely unaware of the danger lurking just beyond the shadows. Suddenly, from the edge of the tree line, two figures emerged, their faces obscured by dark masks that swallowed their features into the growing night. They moved quickly and silently, their eyes fixed on Emily. The first grabbed her arm with a rough grip, yanking her backward out of the weak glow of the station's single overhead light. Emily's startled cry was swallowed by the thickening darkness as the second figure clasped a hand over her mouth, muffling her screams. The stark contrast between the serene rural setting and the violent act unfolding was jarring. The pine trees, usually a symbol of life and renewal, now seemed to loom ominously like silent sentinels to the crime. The faint glow of the gas station's neon sign buzzed erratically, casting eerie red and blue hues on the struggling figures. Time seemed to slow as Emily's wide eyes searched desperately for help. But the station was deserted, the attendant having retreated behind the locked doors after noticing the masked men. No one else was around to hear her muffled pleas. The kidnappers moved swiftly, dragging Emily toward a dark, unmarked van parked just beyond the pumps. The tires crunched against gravel, and the van's engine hummed softly, ready to disappear into the night. Emily's heart pounded erratically in her chest, the cold grip of fear tightening around her as she fought against their hold. A single beam of car headlights cut through the darkness on the highway nearby, momentarily illuminating the grim scene as the van sped away, swallowed by the thickening woods. Back inside the gas station, the attendant fumbled nervously with his phone, his fingers trembling as he dialed the local sheriff's office. His voice was shaky, barely able to articulate the frantic report of the abduction. Outside, the quiet of the rural evening was shattered, replaced by the anxious buzz of radio chatter as deputies scrambled to respond. The news spread quickly through the tight-knit community of Pine Ridge, a place where everyone knew each other, and the idea of such violence was almost incomprehensible. Emily's family, rooted deeply in the town's history, was thrown into turmoil. Her father, a recent deployment overseas with the National Guard, was unreachable, leaving her mother in a state of desperate worry. The town's familiar calm had been shattered in an instant, replaced by a tense urgency that rippled through every household. Neighbors gathered on porch steps, sharing whispered fears and frantic theories as the night grew colder. The stark vulnerability of the moment was underscored by the isolation of the setting. Pine Ridge was a town defined by its quiet streets and dense forests, where the pace of life was slow and the biggest concern was usually the weather or the upcoming county fair. Now, with a young girl taken and the shadows growing longer, the community faced an unimaginable threat that no one was prepared for. In the sheriff's office, calls flooded in, and search parties began to form. Deputies fanned out along the roads leading from the gas station, flashlights bobbing through the underbrush as they scoured the thick woods for any sign of the abductors or Emily. The sound of radios crackled over the night air, a chorus of urgency and determination. Yet beneath the surface, the frustration was palpable. Resources were limited, and the terrain was unforgiving. As the hours ticked by, the sun slipped fully below the horizon, and the veil of night deepened. The gas station, once a simple waypoint on Emily's journey home, now stood as a haunting reminder of what had been lost. The neon sign continued its erratic flicker, casting an unsettling glow on the empty pumps and the faint outline of her bicycle still locked to the rack. The community's fear was matched only by a growing resolve. Parents hugged their children tighter, neighbors made plans to organize search parties at first light, and prayers were whispered in the dark. The peaceful rhythm of Pine Ridge had been broken, replaced by a collective heartbeat pounding with fear and determination. Amid this turmoil, a quiet figure moved through the shadows. Jake Mercer, a retired Navy SEAL with a reputation for resilience and sharp instincts, received the news at his modest cabin on the outskirts of town. The gravity of the situation was clear in his eyes as he reached for the leash of his German Shepherd, Titan, a dog trained for scent tracking and search and rescue. The bond between man and dog was unspoken but undeniable, forged through years of discipline and trust. Jake's face was grim but resolute as he prepared to step into the night. The pine-scented breeze whispered through the trees, carrying with it the faintest traces of Emily's scent, a fragile thread that would soon guide them through the darkness. In the stillness of the evening, the stakes had never been higher, and the quiet town of Pine Ridge held its breath, waiting for a glimmer of hope to pierce the night. The small town of Pine Ridge, Georgia, was no stranger to quiet evenings and close-knit routines. But the abduction of Emily Carter shattered the fragile peace that had long defined the community. As dawn broke over the rolling hills and dense pine forests, a pale light spilled into the modest homes clustered along dusty roads. Inside one such house, the Carter family was already awake, their world unraveling under the weight of uncertainty. Emily's mother, Linda Carter, sat at the worn kitchen table, her hands trembling as she clutched a faded photograph of her daughter. The image captured Emily's bright smile, her youthful spirit frozen in time. The weight of the moment pressed heavily on Linda's shoulders. She was a woman who had faced adversity before, yet nothing had prepared her for the cruel reality of her child's disappearance. Her voice cracked as she recounted Emily's habits, her favorite places, and the small routines that made up the girl's life, details that now felt painfully distant. Emily wasn't just another teenager to her mother. She was the heart of their family, a beacon of hope for a future Linda had long dreamed of. The Carter family had deep roots in Pine Ridge, generations who had tilled the soil, raised families, and built the town's modest institutions. Linda's husband, Frank, had been deployed overseas with the National Guard only weeks before, leaving her to navigate the crisis alone. His absence was a painful void, exacerbating the isolation she felt amid the swelling fear. As news of Emily's abduction spread, the town stirred from its usual calm. Pine Ridge was a place where everyone knew each other by name, where front porches welcomed long conversations and neighbors lent helping hands without hesitation. The idea that something so sinister could invade this sanctuary was almost incomprehensible. At the local diner, conversations that had once revolved around weekend plans and football scores turned to whispers of worry and speculation. The gas station, once an ordinary stop on Emily's route home, was now a grim landmark. The cause, community's collective heartbeat, quickened with every new detail, each rumor adding layers to the mounting tension. Sheriff Tom Reynolds, a man who had served Pine Ridge for over 2 decades, found himself thrust into an unfamiliar role. The abduction was a stark deviation from the usual calls of petty theft or livestock disputes. He convened a meeting at the sheriff's office with his deputies, local volunteers, and representatives from the neighboring counties. The urgency in the room was palpable, the weight of responsibility heavy on every shoulder. Sheriff Reynolds outlined the initial response plan, emphasizing the need for coordinated search efforts and community vigilance. But beneath his calm exterior, he wrestled with frustration. Resources were limited, and the sprawling wilderness surrounding Pine Ridge offered countless hiding places. The deputies divided into teams, some focusing on roadblocks and vehicle checks, others combing through the dense woods. Meanwhile, at Pine Ridge High School, where Emily was a junior, the absence of her familiar presence was deeply felt. Teachers exchanged worried glances, and students huddled in quiet groups, their youthful innocence tempered by the grim reality. Emily had been known as a bright, adventurous spirit, a girl with an infectious laugh and a curiosity that often led her beyond the boundaries of the small town. She volunteered at the animal shelter on weekends and dreamed of becoming a veterinarian, a path she pursued with quiet determination. Her best friend, Sarah Mitchell, sat in the school library, clutching a notebook filled with hastily scribbled plans and hopeful messages. The two had grown up together, their friendship forged through shared secrets and countless afternoons spent exploring the wooded trails that skirted Pine Ridge. Sarah's eyes welled with tears as she recounted Emily's recent excitement about a summer internship at a wildlife rescue center. The thought that her friend was now in danger was almost unbearable. Community leaders stepped forward to organize search parties, phone trees, and prayer vigils. The local church filled with voices lifted in desperate pleas, candles flickering in windows as night fell once again. The town's sense of unity, though shaken, sparked a determination to find Emily and bring her home. Amid this collective anxiety, Jake Mercer prepared to lend his expertise. A retired Navy SEAL, Jake's reputation for quiet strength and unwavering resolve was well known in Pine Ridge. He had returned to his hometown years earlier, seeking solace in the same forests that now held the key to Emily's whereabouts. His dog Titan, a sleek German shepherd with keen senses and an unbreakable bond to Jake, waited patiently by his side, sensing the gravity of the mission ahead. Jake's military background was not just a point of pride, but a practical asset. His experience in tracking, search and rescue operations, and tactical response made him uniquely qualified to assist in the unfolding crisis. The town's law enforcement welcomed his involvement, recognizing that the delicate situation required every available resource. Before departing, Jake paused in his modest cabin, the walls adorned with photographs and medals that spoke of battles fought and lives saved. His thoughts lingered on Emily's family, the pain etched into their faces and the unspoken promise he made to himself to bring her back safely. The scent of pine mingled with the faint trace of Emily's belongings, a scarf she had inadvertently left near the gas station, gave him a starting point. As Jake and Titan set out toward the edge of town, the sun climbed higher, illuminating the dense forests and winding dirt roads that beckoned like an uncharted maze. The air was thick with anticipation and unspoken fears. Every rustle of leaves, every bird call seemed magnified in the stillness, as if nature itself awaited the outcome. The search was not just a physical pursuit, but a race against time. In Pine Ridge, where the safety of a close community had been shattered, hope now rested on the shoulders of a few determined individuals. For Emily, each passing hour deepened the urgency. And for those who loved her, the fight to reclaim their future had only just begun. The dense forest that bordered Pine Ridge was a world unto itself. Layers of towering pines interwoven with thick underbrush. The ground carpeted with fallen needles and moss. Sunlight filtered unevenly through the canopy, casting shifting patterns on the forest floor as a gentle breeze stirred the branches overhead. It was a place of quiet beauty. But on this day, it became a critical frontier in a desperate search. Jake Mercer moved with practiced ease through the woods, his military training guiding each step. Every sound, the snap of a twig, the rustle of leaves, was scrutinized, cataloged. His German shepherd, Titan, trotted beside him, alert and poised, the muscles beneath his sleek coat rippling with energy. Titan's nose twitched, catching scents invisible to the human senses, drawing him forward with unwavering focus. The morning air was crisp, carrying the faint but distinct scent that Jake had been waiting for, the trace of Emily's presence. Earlier that day, a volunteer search party had combed the area near the gas station, but the dense forest had swallowed any obvious signs. Now, Titan's keen instincts were their best chance to follow a trail few could detect. Jake knelt briefly, lowering his hand to Titan's collar, whispering encouragement. The dog responded instantly, nose dipping to the ground as he began to move deliberately through the undergrowth. Jake adjusted his pace to match, eyes scanning for any clues, discarded items, footprints, broken branches that might narrow the search. Local law enforcement had mobilized quickly, but their efforts were hampered by the sprawling terrain and limited manpower. Deputies and volunteers fanned out along dirt roads and trails, shouting Emily's name into the vast silence, their voices swallowed by the trees. Radios crackled intermittently, relaying updates and coordinating movements, but progress was slow. Jake's arrival brought a renewed sense of hope. His reputation as a former Navy SEAL was well known in Pine Ridge, and his skills in tracking and tactical operations were invaluable. As he and Titan weaved deeper into the forest, they became the spearhead of the search, guided by the fragile scent trail that Titan had picked up near the gas station. The dog's focus was unyielding. Titan's ears twitched at every sound, a distant bird call, the rustle of small animals in the underbrush. But his nose remained fixed on the invisible thread leading forward. Jake trusted Titan implicitly. Their partnership was forged through years of shared missions, silent communication, and mutual respect. As they pushed deeper, the terrain grew more challenging. Fallen trees blocked narrow pathways, thick briars scratched at their clothes and skin. The scent trail wavered, growing faint in places, as if Emily's path had been diverted or obscured. Jake's brow furrowed, but he pressed on, knowing that hesitation could cost precious time. Occasionally, Jake paused to examine the ground. Scuffed earth, disturbed leaves, faint impressions in the soil, signs that Titan eagerly sniffed to confirm. Each discovery was a small victory, a thread pulling them closer to the truth. The forest seemed to hold its breath, the usual tranquility replaced by a tense anticipation. Back at the sheriff's office, coordination efforts were intensifying. Sheriff Reynolds worked closely with local deputies and state troopers, pooling resources and expertise. Attempts were made to establish checkpoints along major routes out of Pine Ridge, hoping to intercept any vehicles linked to the kidnappers. The community's resolve was mirrored in the tireless efforts of law enforcement, despite the obstacles. Meanwhile, Emergency calls poured in from concerned residents reporting suspicious activity or unfamiliar vehicles in the surrounding areas. Each tip was logged and investigated, but many proved to be false leads or unrelated incidents. The uncertainty weighed heavily on everyone involved, but the search pressed onward relentlessly. As the afternoon sun climbed higher, Jake and Titan reached a small clearing. The open space was dotted with wildflowers and shaded by a scattering of young pines. Here, the scent trail became stronger, more distinct. Titan's tail stiffened, his body tense with focused energy. He circled the clearing, nose to the ground, before breaking into a purposeful trot toward a thicket at the edge. Jake followed swiftly, heart pounding with a mixture of hope and dread. The underbrush gave way to a narrow animal path leading further into the woods. Titan's pace quickened, and Jake knew they were closing in. Every fiber of his being was alert, ready for what lay ahead. At the perimeter of the clearing, Jake radioed back to the sheriff's office with their coordinates and brief update. He requested backup, knowing the next steps could be dangerous. The last thing anyone wanted was to rush into a confrontation unprepared, yet time was a relentless enemy. As they moved forward, Titan suddenly stopped, ears pricked and body rigid. His hackles raised as he growled low in his throat, a warning that sent a chill down Jake's spine. Ahead, through the dense foliage, a faint movement caught his eye. A shadow shifting just beyond the trees. Jake crouched low, signaling Titan to stay close. His hands instinctively reached for the tactical knife strapped to his belt, eyes narrowing to assess the situation. The forest held its silence, the tension thick and palpable. In that moment, Jake realized the stakes had escalated beyond a simple search. The kidnappers were nearby, aware of their pursuers. The peaceful woods of Pine Ridge had transformed into a battleground, and every step forward was a step deeper into danger. But Jake's resolve was unwavering. Years of training had prepared him for moments like this, where patience, skill, and courage collided. He whispered commands to Titan, who responded instantly. The bond between man and dog a lifeline in the shadowed wilderness. As they prepared to close the distance, every sense sharpened, every breath measured, Jake steeled himself for the confrontation ahead. The pursuit was no longer just about finding Emily. It was about facing the darkness threatening their community and bringing her safely home. The air was thick with tension as Jake Mercer and Titan moved cautiously through the dense thicket. The faint rustle of leaves and distant bird calls now drowned beneath the pounding of Jake's heartbeat. The faint shadow they had glimpsed moments earlier was gone, but Titan's nose remained glued to the earth, unwavering in pursuit of Emily's scent. Each step forward felt heavier, charged with the urgency of the chase and the unknown that lay ahead. Back at the clearing's edge, the forest floor was scattered with broken branches and disturbed leaves, subtle signs that someone had passed through recently. Titan's focus was absolute, his ears swiveling at the slightest sound, his tail flicking in controlled anticipation. Jake's military training kicked into overdrive, every muscle primed, every sense alert. As they pressed deeper into the wilderness, the scent trail grew stronger, guiding them like a beacon through the labyrinth of pines and tangled underbrush. The sunlight filtering through the canopy painted dappled patterns on the ground, but the encroaching shadows of evening hinted at the dwindling window before darkness would cloak the forest entirely. Suddenly, Titan stopped dead in his tracks, his body stiff and low to the ground. A low growl rumbled from deep within his chest, vibrating through the quiet woods. Jake held up a hand, signaling for silence. He crouched beside Titan, eyes scanning the dense foliage just ahead. The dog's hackles stood on end, and his gaze locked on a narrow path leading to a small, weathered cabin partially hidden among the trees. The cabin was an old structure, its paint peeling and windows clouded with grime. Its wooden boards creaked softly in the breeze, and the scent of damp earth and rot hung heavy in the air. The unmistakable signs of human habitation clashed with the wild solitude of the forest, a jarring reminder that this place might hold the answers they sought. Jake's mind raced, piecing together the possibilities. Could this be where Emily was held? The kidnappers' hideout? He reached into his jacket, pulling out a small tactical radio to update the sheriff's office. His voice was low, but urgent. Found potential location. Old cabin in the woods, coordinates sent. Request immediate backup. The radio crackled in response, confirming the deputies were en route. Jake knew time was critical. The kidnappers would likely be on edge, and any delay could jeopardize Emily's safety. He motioned Titan forward cautiously, the dog moving silently through the underbrush, like a shadow. As they approached the cabin, Jake's eyes caught signs of recent activity. A discarded soda can crushed near the entrance, faint footprints in the soft earth, and the faint smell of gasoline. The kidnappers were close by, and the atmosphere thickened with danger. Jake paused at the cabin's rickety porch, peering through a cracked window. Inside, dim light filtered through tattered curtains, revealing scattered belongings and makeshift furnishings. A chair sat overturned on the floor, and the faint sound of muffled breathing reached his ears. His heart clenched. Emily was here. Without hesitation, Jake drew a compact flashlight from his belt, sweeping the beam across the interior. Shadows danced on the walls as he spotted a figure curled in the corner. Emily. She was pale and shaken, but alive, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and hope. Her clothes were torn and dirty, and a thin cut ran along her forehead, crimson staining her skin. Emily, Jake whispered gently, dropping to one knee beside her. It's okay. You're safe now. She blinked, disbelief flickering across her face, before relief softened her features. Thank God, she whispered, voice barely audible. Suddenly, a harsh voice cut through the stillness from just outside the cabin. What the hell's going on in there? The kidnappers had returned, their footsteps crunching on the gravel. Jake's training took over. He gestured for Emily to stay low and silently reached for the door's handle, pushing it open just as two masked men burst onto the porch. The tension exploded into action. Titan lunged forward with a fierce growl, teeth bared, blocking the entrance. One kidnapper swung a crowbar, but Jake dodged swiftly, delivering a precise strike that sent the man staggering backward. The second lunged at Titan, but the dog was faster, snapping at the attacker's arm, forcing him to retreat. Jake moved with calculated precision, his body a blend of strength and control honed through years of combat. He subdued the first man, pinning him against the cabin wall while Titan held the other at bay. The kidnappers struggled, but Jake's grip was unyielding. Call it off, Jake warned, voice steady but commanding. The police are on their way. You're done. The men exchanged fearful glances, realizing their plan had unraveled. With a resigned curse, they dropped their weapons and raised their hands. Within minutes, the sound of sirens pierced the forest as deputies arrived, moving swiftly to secure the scene. Emily was carefully lifted from the floor, wrapped in a warm blanket, tears streaming down her cheeks as she clung to Jake. Sheriff Reynolds approached, gratitude and relief evident in his eyes. You found her, he said simply, his voice thick with emotion. Jake nodded, exhaustion and adrenaline mingling in his expression. She's safe now. Let's get her home. The deputies led the kidnappers away, their faces unmasked and revealing the cold desperation that had driven them. The forest, once a place of fear and uncertainty, now echoed with the sounds of justice taking hold. As Emily was reunited with her mother at the edge of the woods, the community's hope was rekindled. Jake and Titan stood quietly, their bond stronger than ever, both knowing the fight was far from over, but grateful for this hard-won victory. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting the forest in a warm, golden glow, a stark contrast to the darkness that had threatened to consume it. In that moment, Pine Ridge breathed a collective sigh of relief, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, united by the unbreakable spirit of resilience and hope. The abandoned cabin, once a shadowed refuge for desperate criminals, now stood as a stark testament to a plan unraveling beneath the weight of justice. But the capture of the two men in the dim light of the forest was only the surface of a deeper, darker truth. As the deputies secured the scene and tended to Emily, Jake Mercer's instincts told him this was no isolated crime. The kidnappers' hurried retreat and their palpable fear hinted at something larger lurking beyond the trees. Back at the sheriff's office, the atmosphere was heavy with urgency and determination. Sheriff Tom Reynolds paced the cramped room, flanked by deputies and state investigators who had arrived to assist. The two men, now in handcuffs and seated behind reinforced glass, offered little in the way of cooperation. Their eyes darted nervously, aware that their silence might only delay the inevitable, but unwilling to reveal the full extent of their network. Jake sat nearby, his gaze sharp and probing. The years of military interrogation, training surfaced as he observed the men's body language. The subtle twitch of a hand, the flicker of an eye, the hesitation in their speech. He knew that extracting the truth would require more than brute force. It demanded strategy and patience. Detective Laura Mills, a seasoned investigator from the state police specializing in human trafficking cases, arrived with a stack of files and a steely resolve. She had heard of Jake's involvement and welcomed his expertise. "These men," she began, "are likely pawns in a much larger operation. The signs point to an organized ring exploiting vulnerable victims across multiple counties." The room fell into a heavy silence, the gravity of the revelation sinking in. Human trafficking was a scourge that stretched far beyond Pine Ridge, a shadowy underworld that preyed on the innocent. The urgency to dismantle it was matched only by the complexity of the task. Jake shared his observations from the field. The meticulous way the kidnappers had avoided detection, the remote cabin chosen for its isolation, and the signs of recent activity that suggested a well-organized network. He emphasized the importance of following every lead, no matter how small. Detective Mills nodded. These rings operate with layers of secrecy. They use intimidation, fear, and manipulation to maintain control. Breaking that cycle means not just rescuing victims, but shutting down their entire infrastructure. Meanwhile, Emily was being cared for in a nearby hospital, her physical wounds treated and her spirit slowly beginning to heal. Linda Carter remained by her daughter's side, her relief tempered by the knowledge that the ordeal was far from over. Emily's bravery was evident, but the shadows of trauma lingered in her eyes. As the investigation deepened, Jake and Detective Mills collaborated closely with federal agencies. The tangled web of trafficking required a coordinated response: surveillance, undercover operations, and data analysis. The small town of Pine Ridge suddenly found itself at the center of a sprawling battle against a hidden enemy. Community members, once paralyzed by fear, now rallied around the cause. Local leaders organized informational sessions, support groups, and fundraising efforts to aid victims. The church hosted vigils and workshops, fostering awareness and resilience. The town's quiet streets echoed with a new determination to confront darkness with light. Jake took part in training sessions for volunteers, sharing his knowledge of safety protocols and emergency response. Titan, ever vigilant, became a symbol of hope and protection, comforting those affected by the crisis. The bond between man and dog inspired many, a reminder that courage and compassion could coexist. The kidnappers' arrested associates began to surface, their connections mapped through painstaking detective work. Each new arrest brought the community closer to dismantling the trafficking ring, but also revealed the insidious reach of the operation. The face of evil was not a single individual, but a network thriving on secrecy and silence. In the midst of the unfolding investigation, Jake found moments to reflect. The scars of his own past, battles fought in distant lands, losses endured, mingled with the present fight. This war was different. It was fought not on foreign soil, but in the heart of a town he called home. The stakes were deeply personal. Late one evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and cast long shadows over Pine Ridge, Jake stood outside the sheriff's office, Titan at his side. The cool breeze carried the scent of pine and earth, grounding him in the moment. He understood that while the immediate danger had passed, the path ahead would require unwavering vigilance. The community's resilience was a beacon, but the battle against human trafficking was ongoing. Jake's resolve hardened. He would be a guardian not just in battle, but in the everyday struggle to protect the vulnerable. Together with the people of Pine Ridge, he would face the darkness, determined to restore safety, justice, and hope. As the night deepened, the quiet town breathed with cautious optimism. The journey was far from over, but for the first time in weeks, there was a flicker of light piercing the shadows, a promise that even in the darkest times, courage and compassion could prevail. The sterile scent of antiseptic hung in the air as Emily Carter lay in a crisp hospital bed, her pale fingers clutching the soft fabric of a worn quilt. The sterile hum of machines and the muted footsteps of nurses created a backdrop that contrasted sharply with the chaos she had endured. Though her body bore the marks of trauma, scrapes, bruises, and a faint cut on her forehead, the true wounds were etched deeper, hidden beneath a fragile veneer of calm. Linda Carter sat beside her daughter, her eyes red-rimmed but unwavering. She gently brushed a stray lock of hair from Emily's damp forehead, her touch tender yet filled with a mother's fierce protectiveness. The relief of having Emily safe was palpable, but the journey toward healing was only beginning. Words felt inadequate in the face of such raw emotion, so they sat in silence, drawing strength from each other's presence. Emily's gaze flickered toward the door as it opened quietly, revealing Jake Mercer stepping inside, Titan close behind. The German shepherd's calm demeanor seemed to fill the room with a quiet reassurance, a living symbol of loyalty and protection. Jake's face bore the weariness of recent days, but softened as he approached. "Hey, kiddo," Jake said gently, pulling up a chair. "How are you feeling?" Emily managed a small, weary smile. "Better, now that you're here." Jake nodded, understanding the unspoken gratitude. "You were incredibly brave. Everyone in town is proud of you." Her eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "I just want to go home." "We're going to make sure you get there safe," Jake promised. "But for now, rest is what you need." The room was filled with a quiet dignity, a pause in the storm, as Emily's strength began to reassert itself. The hospital staff moved with gentle efficiency, aware that healing would require more than physical care. It demanded patience, empathy, and time. Outside the hospital, the town of Pine Ridge was awakening to a new chapter. The news of Emily's rescue had spread like wildfire, igniting a wave of relief and gratitude. Community members gathered in quiet groups, sharing stories of hope and solidarity. The local diner buzzed with conversations about the importance of vigilance and support for victims. In the days that followed, Emily's story became a catalyst for change. Local organizations mobilized to provide resources for survivors, including counseling services and safe shelters. Volunteers organized drives to raise awareness about human trafficking, determined to prevent others from suffering as Emily had. Jake worked closely with these groups, lending his expertise and personal commitment. He attended meetings, led training sessions, and offered guidance on safety protocols. Titan, ever faithful, became a comforting presence at community events, bringing smiles and easing fears. Emily, encouraged by the support around her, began to find her voice. With the help of counselors, she shared her experience in controlled settings, turning pain into purpose. Her courage inspired others to speak out, breaking the silence that often shrouded such crimes. Linda watched her daughter's transformation with a mixture of pride and sorrow. The road to recovery was long, but Emily's resilience was undeniable. Together, they navigated the complexities of healing, drawing strength from the community's embrace. Meanwhile, Jake remained vigilant. The investigation into the trafficking ring continued, but the rescue of Emily added a sense of urgency and hope. Law enforcement coordinated with federal agencies to track leads and dismantle the network. Each success was a step toward justice, but Jake knew the work was far from over. One evening, as twilight bathed Pine Ridge in a soft glow, Jake stood outside the hospital, watching families walk by, their laughter and warmth contrasting with the darkness that had once threatened the town. Titan rested at his feet, alert yet calm. Jake reflected on the journey, how a single act of courage had sparked a movement, how the bonds of community had strengthened in the face of adversity. The fight against evil was ongoing, but so was the promise of healing and renewal. Inside the hospital room, Emily closed her eyes, a faint smile touching her lips. Surrounded by love and support, she embraced the hope of a future reclaimed, a future where fear no longer held sway, and where the light of resilience shone brightest in the darkest of times. The Zaki Furcher investigation into the human trafficking ring had expanded far beyond the borders of Pine Ridge, weaving a complex web of deception, manipulation, and cruelty that stretched across counties and state lines. In a dimly lit conference room at the Regional Law Enforcement Center, Jake Mercer sat alongside Detective Laura Mills, federal agents, and local deputies, their faces etched with determination and exhaustion. Maps, photographs, and intercepted communications sprawled across the table, each piece a fragment of a larger puzzle. Detective Mills pointed to a series of locations marked in red on the map: abandoned warehouses, remote cabins, and transient rental properties. "This network is sophisticated," she explained, voice steady but grim. "They use these sites to traffic victims, move them quickly, and avoid detection. The challenge is dismantling the entire operation without tipping them off." Jake studied the map, his mind racing through the tactical possibilities. His experience in coordinated operations was invaluable here, bridging the gap between military precision and civilian law enforcement. "We need to strike simultaneously," he advised. "Cut off their routes, intercept communications, and secure rescue teams in place." Federal agents had tapped into phone lines and monitored online chatter, uncovering coded messages and financial transactions linked to the ring. The scale of the operation was staggering, revealing a network that preyed on vulnerable individuals across multiple states. The realization weighed heavily on everyone in the room. The victims were more numerous, their suffering more widespread than anyone had imagined. Meanwhile, back in Pine Ridge, the community's involvement deepened. Local leaders, activists, and volunteers organized awareness campaigns, educational workshops, and support services for survivors. The church hosted forums on prevention and recovery, drawing crowds eager to learn and contribute. The town's collective grief had transformed into a fierce commitment to protect its people. Jake found himself at the heart of these efforts, balancing the demands of the ongoing investigation with outreach and training. He led sessions on recognizing signs of trafficking, personal safety, and how to assist law enforcement. Titan's presence during these events brought comfort and a sense of security, especially to those who had experienced trauma. As the days passed, the coordinated raids were meticulously planned. Teams were assembled with precision. SWAT units, canine handlers, medical personnel, and victim advocates all prepared to act in unison. Communication lines were established to ensure swift response and adaptability. The day of the operation dawned gray and cold, the sky heavy with low-hanging clouds that mirrored the somber mood. Jake stood with his team, reviewing the final plan. The targets were scattered across a 70-mile radius, each location a piece of the Bahovi trafficking puzzle. Time was critical. Any delay could allow the perpetrators to flee or harm their captives. Swift and silent, the teams moved under the cover of early morning darkness. Jake and Titan led one of the assault units toward a dilapidated warehouse on the outskirts of a neighboring town. The air was thick with tension, every step measured, every breath controlled. Inside the warehouse, the scene was grim. Makeshift cages, discarded belongings, and frightened faces illuminated by the harsh glare of flashlights. Victims were quickly identified and comforted, their trust fragile but growing. Medical teams moved swiftly to assess and treat physical and psychological injuries. Outside, arrests were made with calculated efficiency. The captors, caught off guard by the coordinated strikes, offered little resistance as they were taken into custody. The operation extended throughout the day, each raid revealing more victims and unraveling the trafficking network's infrastructure. Back at the command center, updates flowed in: successful rescues, arrests, and emerging leads. The sense of accomplishment was tempered by the knowledge that the fight was far from over. For every victim saved, others remained out there, hidden in the shadows. In the aftermath, the community of Pine Ridge rallied around the survivors, offering support and resources. Counseling services expanded, safe houses were established, and law enforcement intensified patrols and monitoring. The scars left by the trafficking ring were deep, but the town's resolve to heal and rebuild was stronger. Jake reflected on the complexity of the case. The dark undercurrents beneath the surface of a quiet town, the resilience of those who fought back, and the power of unity in the face of evil. The operation had been a critical blow to the trafficking ring, but vigilance remained essential. As night fell over Pine Ridge, the stars emerged, their light faint but steadfast against the darkness. The journey toward justice and recovery continued, guided by the unwavering commitment of those who refused to let fear win. In the quiet moments, Jake and Titan rested, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Their bond, a beacon of hope amid the shadows. The sun rose slowly over Pine Ridge, casting a golden hue across the quiet streets and awakening the town with a gentle promise of renewal. The events of recent weeks had left an indelible mark on the community, but rather than fracture, Pine Ridge found itself bound tighter by shared purpose and unwavering resolve. The fight against the human trafficking network had sparked a powerful movement, one that extended beyond law enforcement into the very heart of the town. At the community center, a steady stream of residents gathered for the first of many organized meetings. Tables were lined with pamphlets detailing signs of trafficking, resources for victims, and ways to get involved. Volunteers, activists, and local leaders mingled, their faces reflecting a mix of determination, hope, and cautious optimism. The room buzzed with quiet conversations, plans taking shape amid the hum of collective energy. Jake Mercer stood near the entrance, greeting newcomers and offering reassurance. His presence was a steady anchor for the community, a reminder that strength could be found in unity and action. Titan, ever vigilant, lay calmly at his feet, drawing smiles from children and comfort from those grappling with recent trauma. Mayor Evelyn Harper, a woman whose steady leadership had become vital during the crisis, addressed the gathering with a voice that carried both gravity and encouragement. "Pine Ridge has faced a darkness that threatened to consume us," she began. "But together, we have forged a light that cannot be extinguished. Today, we take another step forward, not just in healing, but in building a future where safety, awareness, and compassion define our home." The meeting transitioned into workshops led by experts in trauma recovery, victim advocacy, and law enforcement. Residents learned how to recognize warning signs, how to support survivors, and how to create safe environments for all. Stories of resilience were shared, each one a thread weaving a tapestry of strength and solidarity. Outside, a group of teenagers organized a volunteer patrol, inspired by Jake's training sessions. They planned to walk neighborhood streets during evening hours, providing visibility and a sense of security. Their youthful energy infused the effort with renewed vigor, a testament to the town's commitment across generations. Local businesses joined the cause, displaying posters and distributing informational materials. The diner where Emily had worked became a hub for fundraising events, its walls echoing with laughter and camaraderie as patrons united for a common goal. The scent of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the spirit of hope that filled the air. Faith communities opened their doors, hosting prayer vigils and support groups. Clergy spoke openly about the importance of confronting evil with courage and compassion. The church bell tolled softly in the evenings, a steady heartbeat reminding Pine Ridge of its collective resilience. At the heart of these efforts was a growing coalition: neighbors, officials, and advocates who met regularly to coordinate initiatives and share resources. They formed task forces focused on education, prevention, and survivor support, ensuring that the momentum would not wane. Jake found himself deeply involved, balancing his role as a protector with that of a mentor and community leader. He worked alongside Detective Laura Mills and social workers, bridging the gap between law enforcement and the people they served. His bond with Titan remained a symbol of hope and protection, a living testament to the power of trust and partnership. In quiet moments, Jake reflected on the transformation unfolding around him. The small town he had returned to after years of service was no longer defined solely by its tranquility, but by its fierce determination to confront darkness and nurture healing. The scars left by the trafficking ring were real, but they were met with compassion and action. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the town square, Jake stood with a group of survivors and advocates. Their faces reflected a mixture of pain and empowerment, each story a beacon guiding the way forward. Together, they planted a small tree, a symbol of growth, renewal, and enduring strength. As twilight embraced Pine Ridge, the town's lights flickered on, illuminating streets and homes with a warm glow. The community's journey was far from complete, but the path ahead was clearer, forged by unity and unwavering resolve. In the stillness of the evening, Jake and Titan walked through the quiet streets, the bond between man and dog, a comforting presence amid the ongoing challenges. Pine Ridge had faced its darkest hours and emerged stronger, a community united not just by geography, but by a shared commitment to protect, heal, and rebuild. The story of Pine Ridge was no longer one of fear, but of hope, a testament to the power of collective action and the unbreakable spirit of a town determined to safeguard its future. The first light of dawn crept over the horizon, casting a pale glow across Pine Ridge and signaling the start of a day that would mark a turning point in the fight against the trafficking ring that had gripped the region. Law enforcement agencies, working in unison with federal partners, had meticulously planned a series of coordinated raids designed to dismantle the remaining pockets of the network. The stakes were high, and the operation demanded precision, speed, and unyielding resolve. Jake Mercer stood alongside SWAT officers and K-9 handlers in a staging area on the outskirts of town. The air was cool and still, punctuated only by hushed conversations and the soft panting of Titan, who sat alert at Jake's side. Every member of the team was prepared, their focus razor-sharp. Maps and intelligence reports lay spread across folding tables, detailing target locations scattered over a wide area. "Remember, efficiency and safety are paramount," the lead commander briefed. "We're cutting off this operation at its roots. Move swiftly, secure victims, and apprehend suspects with minimal risk." Jake nodded, feeling the familiar surge of adrenaline tempered by years of experience. This was no longer just a mission. It was a culmination of months of work, community effort, and the collective will of Pine Ridge and beyond. The lives of many depended on their success. The teams split into units, each assigned to specific sites identified through exhaustive investigation. Jake's unit moved toward an old warehouse on the outskirts of a neighboring county, a location flagged for recent suspicious activity. Titan's nose twitched as they approached, picking up faint scents that whispered of human presence. Inside the warehouse, the atmosphere was thick with neglect. Dust motes danced in shafts of light, filtering through cracked windows, and the air smelled of damp wood and rust. Suddenly, muffled voices and hurried footsteps echoed from a back room. Jake signaled his team to move silently, weapons drawn but poised for restraint. Bursting through the door, they found several captives huddled together, their faces etched with fear and exhaustion. The victims' eyes widened with cautious hope as law enforcement closed in, the promise of freedom tangible in the charged air. Medical personnel immediately began assessing the survivors, offering blankets and water, their calm presence a balm to trembling souls. Outside, other units secured suspects attempting to flee, their resistance minimal against the overwhelming force. Arrests were made swiftly and decisively, handcuffs clicking shut on those who had thrived in the shadows for too long. The operation extended throughout the day, with simultaneous raids uncovering hidden caches, dismantling communication hubs, and rescuing more victims. Each successful rescue was a victory, a step toward restoring dignity and safety to those who had endured unspeakable horrors. Back in Pine Ridge, news of the raid spread quickly. The community gathered at the local church, where leaders and survivors shared updates and expressions of gratitude. The palpable sense of relief was tempered by sober reflection. While this was a significant blow to the trafficking network, the path to justice and healing remained long. Jake found himself at the center of the unfolding aftermath. He worked closely with victim advocates, ensuring that survivors received comprehensive care, medical attention, counseling, legal support. His bond with Titan remained a source of comfort during this turbulent time, the dog's steady presence helping to ease anxieties and build trust. The arrests sent ripples through the criminal underworld, signaling that Pine Ridge and its allies were no longer vulnerable. prosecutors prepared strong cases, drawing on extensive evidence gathered through surveillance, witness testimony, and forensic analysis. The goal was clear: hold perpetrators accountable and dismantle the infrastructure that enabled their crimes. For the community, the coordinated raids reinforced a renewed sense of safety and collective strength. Neighborhood watch programs intensified, and local law enforcement increased patrols, fostering vigilance without fear. Educational programs continued to empower residents, transforming awareness into action. In quiet moments, Jake reflected on the journey. From the initial abduction that shook a small town to the sweeping operation that struck at the heart of a sprawling network. The fight had been arduous, marked by moments of despair and flashes of hope. The scars were real, but so too was the resilience that had carried them through. As night fell over Pine Ridge, the stars emerged, their steady light a silent witness to the enduring struggle for justice. The raids had dealt a decisive blow, but Jake knew the fight was far from over. Vigilance, compassion, and unity would be the pillars that sustained the community in the days to come. Walking through the quiet streets with Titan at his side, Jake felt a profound connection to the town he had vowed to protect. The path ahead was uncertain, but with courage and determination, Pine Ridge would continue to stand as a beacon of hope. A place where darkness could be challenged and healing could take root. The crisp morning air carried a subtle chill as Jake Mercer and Titan walked along the familiar streets of Pine Ridge, the town slowly stirring awake beneath the soft glow of dawn. The weight of recent months, the battles fought, lives saved, and darkness confronted, settled quietly between them. The streets, once shadowed by fear, now bore the marks of a community healing and moving forward. The gas station where Emily had been taken stood just ahead, its faded neon sign flickering gently in the early light. To many, it was a simple landmark on the edge of town, but to Jake and those who had lived through the ordeal, it was a symbol, a reminder of vulnerability met with courage, of despair answered by resilience. Jake paused, his gaze sweeping over the small cluster of buildings that made up the heart of Pine Ridge. The diner hummed softly with early patrons, the school bus rumbled along its route, and children's laughter drifted faintly from a nearby playground. Life, in its quiet persistence, was reclaiming its place. Behind Jake, Titan shifted, his keen eyes scanning the surroundings with the same vigilance that had saved countless lives. The dog's steady presence was a comfort, a living testament to the bond forged through trials and triumphs. Inside the sheriff's office, Sheriff Tom Reynolds reviewed the final reports from the coordinated raids that had dismantled the trafficking ring. The arrests were numerous, the evidence overwhelming, and the community's safety restored. Yet, the sheriff understood that vigilance must remain constant, that darkness could creep back if left unchecked. Jake entered the office, exchanging nods with Reynolds. "We did what we set out to do," Jake said quietly. "But the work doesn't end here." The sheriff nodded in agreement. "It never really does. But Pine Ridge has changed. We're stronger now." Outside, townsfolk gathered in the square for a community event, an expression of gratitude and unity. Survivors shared stories of hope and healing, their voices steady and inspiring. Local leaders spoke of renewed commitment to education, prevention, and support for victims. The atmosphere was one of resolve and optimism. Emily, now healthy and vibrant, stood alongside her mother and Jake. Her smile was radiant, beacon of the journey from darkness into light. She addressed the crowd with a confidence born of courage, her words a call to action and solidarity. "We are not defined by what happened to us," she said, her voice clear and strong. "We are defined by how we rise, how we stand together to protect each other and build a future free from fear." The crowd responded with heartfelt applause, the sound echoing through the crisp air. Titan, ever loyal, sat quietly at Jake's side, his calm presence a reminder of the strength found in partnership. As the event concluded, Jake and Emily shared a quiet moment. "Thank you," she whispered, eyes shining with gratitude. "For everything." Jake smiled, his gaze steady. "We all did this together. Pine Ridge is home because of people like you." The sun climbed higher, casting warm light over the town as life continued. A tapestry woven from threads of resilience, hope, and community. The scars of the past remained, but they were met with healing hands and steadfast hearts. Jake and Titan began their walk home, the bond between man and dog unspoken yet profound. The journey ahead held challenges, but also promise. A promise that good would prevail, that the shadows could be faced with courage, and that Pine Ridge would forever stand as a sanctuary forged in the fires of adversity. In that moment, as the town bustled softly around them, Jake understood that their story was not just one of survival, but of unwavering strength and the enduring power of unity. The future was theirs to protect, and they would do so with every fiber of their being.